if I stand here, am I just like blocking what I'm showing you? Okay, all right. Okay, first I want to thank Ashlyn and her great team here. It's amazing to be back in Galway. I think this is my third time at the festival. I always think how lucky the kids of Galway are to have an amazing festival like this, to see work from around the world. So thank you for your support. And thank you to Culture Ireland for helping to get me here, and Creative Ireland for supporting these talks. I know no matter where I go, the events would not happen without funding, so thank you to the funders in the room. I am going to tell you just a little bit about IPAY. IPAY is International Performing Arts for Youth. It's based in Philadelphia in the US. I am not American, I'm Canadian. I live in Toronto. We're a very international organization. Our board is very international. But I'm very happy to say our home is in Philadelphia, which is a beautiful theater city, about an hour's train ride from New York. So we're kind of in the thick of things in the northeast of the US. IPAY is an arts service organization. We're a membership-based organization. So our members are comprised of artists, presenters, producers, educators, really anyone that's supporting professional performing arts for young audiences. That's our common denominator. So we are a community of people that come together in support of getting work in front of young people. I'm going to show you a short little video because I always think I'm paid to say good things about IPAY. And so I have a little bit of video that is from the membership talking about what IPAY means to them. And I always feel that's a lot more impactful than me telling you blah, 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 it's great, blah, blah, blah. So let's see if this works.
Super smart, and whose commitment is to present outstanding work to children. Well, IPAY is where I'm able to see the work. It's a wonderful thing because you're able to see the full performance, and that's very important with work for young audiences.
IPAY means to me family in many ways, and connection, and the opportunity to come each year to be inspired and challenged by the work that I see, but most importantly by the people that I meet.
I also like the aspect that it's an international juried performances, so you get to see works from all over the world, not only Canada and the United States, but internationally.
We're changing the world one kid at a time by introducing them to the arts.
IPAY for me is not only a meeting ground for national artists and leaders in the field of emerging arts to come together, but also a place where dialogue is sparked. A community of people that care about things that I care about.
Personally, it just means a wonderful community.
A really strong network of very dedicated, passionate people who care about the same art form that I care about. We sell our shows here and are able to access touring opportunities into the US as well as overseas. So it's the most important marketplace to us for that. It is the most amazing opportunity to see work from all over the world.
Network with colleagues from all over the country and beyond, and to really connect.
We really live in these little bubbles, and I feel like a lot of times we get stuck in our New York City bubble in terms of theater and lots of other isms and ideas. And I think that IPAY is a really wonderful place to break outside of that bubble and really learn the different ways that other people are making magic happen.
It's completely inspiring to be here with other amazing artists, as well as presenters who believe in the work that we do, as well as agents and representatives that really help carry the field forward, I feel.
When home feeling really invigorated. That's one of the reasons why I'm
IPAY is important to me because as an organization that's presenting work for young audiences and looking internationally, it's really important to have
peer-to-peer conversations with colleagues that are doing similar work?
It's a community of people who share my values and my passion for affecting our communities in a profound way. And it's changed the way I do my job, and truly has changed my life.
We only had to pay half of those people to say those things. Mary wouldn't do it. My budget wasn't big enough for Mary. So we are membership based. However, a lot of people that come every single year are not members, and so we really are open to the community. We try and encourage as many people to come to the event as possible. The one thing I should clarify a little bit is that there's IPAY is the organization and Showcase is the event. So Showcase is the main thing that we produce annually, happens in January. Up until this year, it's been a traveling showcase, and that it's been to a different US or Canadian city every single year. Starting this year, our 40th anniversary showcase, it'll always be based in Philadelphia. And so we're happy really to be home in Philadelphia and to be producing the showcase there. The community aspect is really important to us. The showcase really used to be only about buying and selling work. And for a very long time, we had this stigma about if you didn't have a show to sell, there wasn't a place for you. And now really, IPAY really is a place for people to come together and talk about work, to see work, to share work, to exchange. And so the marketplace is still the backbone for us, but it's so much more than that. I don't even need these slides because I just keep talking and I talk over what I'm going to say anyway. The showcase is the main thing we do. The gathering place is about it's about seeing work together. It's a fairly small environment. We have about 500 people come together in January for the 5 days. A lot of the showcases in North America are over 1,000 people, and so they're these huge, overwhelming, I feel, events where you don't always get to connect with everyone. 500 people for us feels fairly boutique-y. You feel like you're a part of something. For a lot of people that are coming to the event, you might be one of a very small team of people dedicated to doing work for young audiences in a huge performing arts center. And so when you come together, you feel like you found your people. And we hear that a lot. People say this is their tribe. They feel that they're home because everyone who is there is dedicated to young people. Kindling is a relatively new thing that has become kind of the heart of Showcase. We used to do a very traditional professional development workshop series. We would do like traditional seminars on how to raise money to pay for the bus to bring kids to the venue, and how to write visa applications, and all very important things, but really, who cares? There's a place for that, and there's a place where you can find that information, but really we want to take advantage of bringing people together to have a conversation, and that's what Kindling is about. Kindling, I always say Kindling in English, because I usually do this for people who don't speak English. Kindling is like the smallest piece of material that you use to light a fire. And so kindling for us is the spark for a conversation. And the idea is that we plant the seeds for a larger conversation that hopefully grows out from Showcase. And so it's a curated platform for conversation. We have a different theme every year, and we've just recently changed it so that it's a 2-year arc. We found that 4 days isn't enough to have a serious conversation about anything, and so we've changed the arc so that we start a conversation in 1 year. It goes over that whole span of the year, and then it culminates in the following year. The idea behind Kindling is, for me, part of my favorite thing about this job is to come to places like this and to sit in the bar at the end of the day of seeing 5 shows and debate the hell out of the shows and talk about what you loved, what you didn't love, talk about the issues that the shows were inspired by, and have that kind of critical debate about why they're important, why young people should see it, and how do we show important work like this. And I felt like that was really missing when we were doing those traditional workshops, because we were talking about something very clinical and very work-based, and we weren't talking about the heart of things. And so for me, it was really important to kind of spark this conversation, especially in North America, where this kind of dialogue wasn't happening. And so it takes critical issues that are being discussed and explored outside in the world, brings them to North America. We try not to preach to people. We try and spotlight different perspectives from around the world and let people find their own relevancy and their own connection and give their own perspective on it. So we're not trying to solve problems. We're trying to put an idea out there and let the community have a conversation about it, let people think about it, and then give them time to come back and respond to it. This January in Philadelphia, the theme will be home. So we'll be exploring that idea of home for the next probably 18 months. And so it's everything that comes with that word. What does home mean? What does homelessness mean? What does displacement mean? Forced immigration, refugees, newcomer, all of those things that are happening, really happening over here, happening a little bit back home. And trying to explore this through the lens of young people and young people within a performing arts experience. So what's our responsibility as artists? What's our responsibility as presenters? How do we tackle this concept and present it in a responsible way to young people so that we can have a dialogue about it? As you said, the backbone of the event, of Showcases, it's a marketplace. 40 years ago, the Showcase started because there was a group of presenters who weren't seeing enough work to populate their family or their school seasons, and so they decided to independently produce this showcase of work from around the world. And so that's still the backbone. Companies are coming to showcase their work. Presenters are coming to buy the work. I like this image of a Moroccan marketplace because for me it's more evocative of the smells, and you don't really know what you're going to find when you get there, and it's not just going to the supermarket and picking stuff off the shelves. It's a lot more dynamic than that. And we're trying to make the showcase more of a dynamic place like that, so you don't know what you're going to find when you get there. There will be some things that you know you're looking for, but maybe you'll be surprised and you'll find something else. Maybe you'll meet someone while you're there that you won't necessarily make a connection with that year, but a few years down the road, something will come from it. That's the marketplace that we're trying to convey. Showcase itself, as you heard in the video clip, we do full showcases, which is quite rare in North America for these kinds of events. And so we have about up to 15 full-length productions. So artists actually get to come, bring their whole entire cast or a whole entire show and showcase it to a dedicated audience. That's primarily a professional audience, but we try and cram some young bums in seats too. And so that when you're seeing it with young people, and it's not just us sitting watching a show, but you're getting the actual feeling of having young people in the space. While we would love to showcase more work, it's impossible within the time frame. All 500 people see all shows together, and so you're going through the experience together. Everyone sees everything. Nothing is in conflict with each other. So on top of the full-length showcases, we tend to cram in these other little experiences for artists to tell or show you a little bit more about their work as well. And so on top of the full-length showcases, we have 20-minute excerpts that people can show, and we have 5-minute tell experiences. Sometimes it's hard for a company from Australia, per se, to come halfway across the world with a huge set and do their whole entire production. So it might be more cost effective for them to send their artistic director over with a slideshow to talk about their experience and show that to the community. The showcase is adjudicated, so we have a committee of about 12 international artists and presenters. We have about 150 applications every single year. From that 150, we select the 15 full-length and the show and tell experiences. that process begins, the call for new applications goes out in early February, ends in May. In June, we get together, we watch full-length video on all 150 applications. It's soul-destroying and inspirational at the same time. And from that, we're able to kind of pick out a diverse range of shows. We often do cultural spotlights. Most of the members that attend the event, this is the only professional event that they have the budget to attend in a year. And so they don't have the opportunity to come to these festivals around the world to see a range of work. What they're seeing is at the showcase. And so part of what we're trying to do is provide a spotlight on a cultural context that gives a broader snapshot. And so, for example, our members have seen a lot of work coming over from Holland, and they begin to identify with different companies that have come from Holland, but they don't know the cultural context in which the work is created. And so for us to provide a spotlight, talks a little bit about the funding structure, how artists are creating the work, the festivals that are happening in that region, which showcases the work, and gives people kind of a broader perspective on where that work is coming from. And sometimes that helps with the cultural context in presenting that work over here. And that also is interesting for our artists to hear about funding cycles and creation time and devising work and maybe a different way of creating work for young people. That's all important for us. And very exciting for us is that we're just in the very initial stages of talking about doing an Irish spotlight sometime in the future and developing that opportunity.
Oh, serious. Oh, come on, man. Debbie Downer.
So this is the. So you want a tour to America? Why? it's Trump notwithstanding, it's the first question we ask artists is, what is the appeal in touring to North America? No matter where you're coming from, you have a country in which you can tour your work, and perhaps you do. And so we want to know, why is it important for you to bring your work over to North America? Is it about artistic exchange? How is it going to be impactful upon you? Have you considered the financial implications? Those are all important things to us and often impact the success of a tour, ensuring that artists have thought about what that process means to come over. Touring is touring, but touring is also different depending upon where you go. And so there's a lot of things to consider when you're looking at the American market. This is the scale of UK and Ireland. Yeah, I already fucked up once today. Yeah. And so you probably know, if you're an artist working here in Ireland, how difficult it is to travel across your country and what that means logistically. This is the scale of the US. This does not include Canada. I think there's a very romantic notion of what it means to tour to the US. It usually involves the New Victory in New York and maybe California because there's palm trees and beaches. There's a lot in between. And in fact, it's the in-between that often makes the tour. Most venues are looking at very specific runs unless you have a very big sellable show. And so it means lots of small stops in lots of towns you've never heard of to make your tour work. And that's the reality of a tour. So that's just part of the logistics. It's also part of the power of coming to a place like IPAY, is because you're not just meeting New York and California, you're meeting all of those presenters in between. And it takes those connections. Those presenters are networked and they work together. And so you might not know what the stops are, but they will help with those stops. That's part of the benefit of coming to the event, is that you can help fill those holes. Yay. There's also Canada. And tours, North American tours often cross the border, which brings another level of logistic to it. Both within Canada and the US, there's a network of festivals. There's a whole range of size of performing arts centers. Small performing arts centers, I would say average seat is probably about 700 to 800 and up from there. And so a lot of our presenters are looking for shows that fill a 1,200 seat hall. That's the reality very often of touring in North America. Of course, small shows do come over. There's, again, a very strong festival network. Very often, festivals would have a much more progressive aesthetic. Maybe I would describe it that way. And so we're able to show smaller shows and maybe shows that are a little bit more provocative or less commercial or less mainstream or less title-based. These are all kind of questions that you need to kind of consider when you're considering a work to bring over. So great expectations. The expectations from a presenter looking for work to bring to their venue in North America. The obvious things are marketability and tourability. Unfortunately, that's the reality. They're looking for shows that they can sell. That often means they're looking for titles that they recognize. However, there's probably half dozen artists in the room that have created work that has come over and toured very successfully that is not title-based. And so it's absolutely possible. It's probably just a little bit harder to sell that work. Again, probably reliant upon people seeing it versus looking at the title and thinking, yeah, that's going to sell. Presenters are looking for work that is ready to tour, so that means having professional images, having video, having all of the support material, tech riders, knowing when it's available, knowing how many people are going to be out on the road. All of that has to be buttoned up and ready to email to people. On top of that, very often, most presenters are looking for educational support material. It's probably no different here, but most presenters are reliant upon that connection to schools in order to sell their work, and so they're looking for you as the artist to have made some of those connections. Most of our festivals and large performing arts centers have educational staff as well that will assist with that, but if you have that material, it's going to help that connection. I think that's for you. I think that's it, kind of in a nutshell. I know we're going to be talking about touring in general, and so I haven't gone too specifically into that. That's kind of the nutshell of our event and what we do and the opportunity we try to provide. Oh, sorry, one thing I forgot to say is the other thing that we can help facilitate and that the presenters are often looking for is representation. Sometimes makes things easier. And so companies can come over, have their own tour manager, and manage that process themselves. However, coming to IPAY very often helps with a relationship with a US agent. Agents know every single spot in between California and New York, and they'll sell the hell out of your show. They'll book it in a way that makes sense from going from A to Z. Most presenters have a relationship with the agents. There's a trust there already. And so it means you can carry on with making the work and doing the work, and the agents sell the work. And so that's very often a benefit of coming to the event, is to make those connections as well. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, or if you want to save the questions for the panel. If anyone has anything specific IPAY related, I'm here to Sunday. I drink beer. I'll be in the pub. Molly?
Do you want to give the dates for applying to go as a, to go to IPAY?
Yeah, if anyone can come, and it's not reliant upon having work. It's artists, presenters, producers, like everyone is literally welcome to come. It's on sale now. So if you go to www.ipayweb.org, you can read all about it, as well as the organization. The website is crap. We're currently creating a new one, but the info is there now. You can register online. It's cheaper if you're a member, so we push the membership thing. And that will go. That's on sale leading up until January. This year we're partnering with TYA USA, which is the US equivalent of Acetage, or TYUK, TYNI.
TYA Ireland, TYA UK.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. And then the application process, if companies want to apply, begins in early February. There's also an opportunity, you probably saw some quick flashes of the exhibit hall, the marketplace. We actually have like a physical marketplace. So if companies want to buy a booth, or companies want to partner together and buy a booth, so it's kind of like being in a marketplace, a farmer's market. You have a table, you have your material, presenters kind of parade through and you chat, and you can give your videos, and it's a nice place to meet people as well. So you can buy that opportunity online, and that gives you access to the full showcase as well. Thanks, Lottie.
Because I don't have any invested interest in this.
I gave her 20 euros.
I have been to IPAY, I haven't been the last few years, but it's really, it's a good thing to go to ahead of time before thinking of applying, because you really get a feeling for what people are looking for, you get to talk to people, and it's very, very contained, so you really get a chance to meet lovely, lovely people, really get a chance, you're there all day for about a week or so, 3 or 4 days, but you really get a chance to learn a lot about what's available, who's looking for what, and just to even just have a face-to-face connection is incredibly important.
100%. Yeah, thank you for saying that. We really try and recommend to artists. Like, artists will ask all the time, what show should I apply with? And I don't know. I can give you my own personal preference based on my own aesthetic and what I would program as an artistic director, but there's 100 other different answers. And so to come over and see the work that's showcasing, and for you to be able to pick the right show to come over for that market, the beautiful thing and the crazy thing about IPAY Showcase, or really any showcase, is I can sit in a show and have it destroy my soul because it's so horrible and it doesn't connect with me and I have so many questions about it, and you walk out so dispirited, and 3 people beside you are talking about how they're going to figure out how to bring it to their venue. And then we go see the next one, and those 3 people hate the show that we're watching, and I absolutely love it and want to figure out how to bring it. And that's the beauty of it, and that's the diversity of the market, and it's the diversity of the presenters. And so really it's up to you to decide what is the right show for you to bring, and so to come over and figure that out yourself is amazing if you have that opportunity.
Can I ask, you're talking about large venues and your own showcase, but then for young, very young audiences, which are very small audiences, is that appropriate?
Yes, the market or the community for work for very, very young in North America is fledgling. It's very young compared to the European community, but there are people who are doing it. There are a number of artists who are creating work for very young artists, very young audiences, very young artists, both. Yes, so every year we do, we have some work. So this year I think we have Puzzle from Lithuania, which is for 3 and under. And we have Dalia Thielander from Sweden coming over to talk about choreography and purpose-built spaces for babies. So it's definitely part of the conversation. Really for us, young people is 0 to college. And so a show I could do in Toronto for 8-year-olds would probably be a 15-year-old show in Tennessee. And so again, like it's kind of up to the presenter to decide their audience and who it's appropriate for. And so we give the artist range on shows, but really it's up to the presenter to decide their audience. Good?
And showcase, and I haven't yet been it, but I'm very excited to go someday. I know a lot of people in the room have been here, so it'd be really interesting to get your insights and your experience of attending Showcase. Thank you so much, Eva. When we get into discussion mode. So I'd just like to introduce the panel here. So to my right, we have Maureen Ahern from Theatre Love It. And each of the panelists will be introducing themselves. I'm just going to introduce them very briefly, but we're delighted to have Theatre Love It here for the festival with a very image that you saw, they called her Vivaldi. A special thanks to Mary and her team for giving us an extra show today for one of our keen students. We've had some challenges at Baboró this week and last with a small matter of a hurricane and an unfortunate illness of one of our performers. So the generosity of our venues and our artists has been really fantastic.
Thank you.
So, and Muireann has a lot of experience of touring to the States and in fact showcasing it at IPAY. And next we have Christian Shrewder, who is here from Denmark with the very beautiful World Images with his wife Pernille. They have a company called Modern Bach, which is a partner in Small Size Project, a Creative Europe project that Baboró has been involved in since 2009. So we're delighted to have Madame Bach here. And Christian is a board member of Assetege Denmark and has also toured extensively around the world with Madame Bach, and particularly in recent years to China and Japan. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear about touring in that part of the world. Neal Murray is co-director of Abbey Theatre, formerly of National Theatre Scotland, and we're delighted to have him here today to chair the session. And delighted with he and Graham and how they're turning that good ship, and the support that they're giving to work for young people. And we're delighted to have Sarah from the Abbey here, that's been here all week playing in this beautiful space, and again the generosity of giving us an extra school show tomorrow so that we can try and catch up with all of those children who missed out on Monday and Tuesday. And then we have Paul Bosco McAnini, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Cahoots, Northern Ireland. We're delighted to have him join us today and to come to the festival. And with a number of other delegates from Northern Ireland, because this discussion is very much about the island, leaving the entire island and a kind of a collegiate approach. And artistic director Paul has toured extensively again to the United States and beyond, and has been involved at IPAY. And Kieran Walsh is here, Programme Manager with Culture Ireland. We're delighted to have him join the panel as well, and again has a lot of experience of, I suppose from the other side a little in terms of supporting Irish artists to make that journey outside of the country. So I'm going to get out of your way and
shove it around.
We'll bring out these chairs.
It's going to kill us moving the microphone now. We're all going to go there. Sorry. Should have saved. I don't mind. Let's sit in the middle. Let's sit in the middle. Come on. Sorry, if you were doing that, I thought I should have said it. Probably all going to shove it around. Do a shuffle. Okay. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Great. We'll give you a rest for a minute. I think you can sit out the first question.
You look gleam in your eye.
No, nothing like that. Nothing like that.
I thought you were going to challenge me.
No, not at all. No challenging. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Okay. Okay, we good? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Aislinn, for asking me to come to Galway to be here today. I'm delighted to be here. As Aislinn said, the Abbey is already here. My colleague Phil Kingston has been with you, I know, for most of the week. And Sarah's here as well. And I suppose I'm also really interested in being here to see a lot of work tomorrow. So I have a very busy day, which is good. And also to meet these amazing, extraordinary artists and people from all around the world who are here. As the Abbey in Dublin, which is kind of Ireland's national theatre, tries, I think we're trying to lift our head a little to see if we can engage better and more productively with audiences and work for children and young people right across the range. So it's great to be here. In my previous life, I was lucky to work extensively in Scotland for 25 years. And I suppose be in Scotland at a time when children's theatre really kind of leapt to proper prominence and was taken very seriously. And you will know a lot of the people involved, but I have to doff my cap to the mighty Tony Ricci, who I thought would be here. Where is he? It's outrageous. Take off. Take off, schmake off, we say. I shall have words with him. But it was great to be in Scotland. So, yeah. No, don't. But it was great to be in Scotland as Imaginate, which is now, of course, the Edinburgh International Children's Festival, and companies like Catherine Wheels, Visible Fictions were all emerging, and not just being taken seriously for making great work for children and young people, but being taken seriously for making great theatre. And I think that was what was really special about that time. And in my previous job at National Theatre of Scotland, we were always very proud, and she's in the house as well. One of the first big show the National Theatre of Scotland made was a show for children and young people, which was The Wolves and the Walls, based on Neil Gaiman's novel, which we took to the New Victory in New York. And it kind of set a tempo, and that company as a National Theatre still is doing work for children and young people and still takes it seriously. So I know the Abbey has always taken that seriously as well, but I think we've got a chance to take it on a step. Anyway, enough about me waffling on. We've got about an hour, so we're going to have some panel discussion, but then there's lots of brilliant people in the room, so the conversation needs to be opened up. So you will be participating. Aisling did such a brilliant introduction that I don't need to do that again, so I'm just going to kind of start off. I'm going to give Boomer a rest for a couple of minutes because he's already earned his corn, so you can sit still. What I'd like to do is just go around the panel and talk us briefly about your personal experiences of making work for children and young people, and particularly touring it. And I'd love to hear, and this is unfair, but let's do it, like your best and your worst experience of doing it, because I think the worst ones are the ones you really learn from sometimes. And we had one very particularly bad one in China, which we can talk about later, which was a massive learning curve of how to tour work for young people to China. And I need therapy from you later. But can we start? So just talk about, best and worst experiences and what it is that kind of, I suppose, keeps you doing it and makes it so important to your raison d'etre as artists and as companies. Maureen, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Neil. Sure. So I suppose just to say we have been to IPAY on 2 occasions, and it was a real springboard to be able to tour the work, in America, and then from presenters, meeting other presenters through word of mouth. I suppose in terms of, I was thinking, when Neil says your worst experience, I guess we had a steep learning curve when we didn't invest in a production manager who had international experience. Now, it wasn't anything that was alarmist or, that we couldn't claw back, but actually thinking about international touring, be it as a showcase, a once-off, you've one opportunity at IPAY, no pressure. And, I suppose production management is where, somebody who has that kind of international knowledge and know-how, because you're dealing with freight, logistics, different time zones, all of that. A producer who can really, tick all the boxes, and because you're entering into an engagement that mightn't happen for, I suppose, 2 years. And if you're working with actors who might have other, I suppose, avenues, it's to kind of make sure that all of those things are contracted well in advance, because we're really entering into something where there's an investment in cash flow as a small company. That was another little glitch we had initially. We had creative equity, I hope, but in terms of financial sort of being able to put it on the table, we that kind of cash flow was tricky. So again, it was to find people who might be willing to help us out there, and that was something that we kind of found very useful. And again, it's I suppose the looking at even I suppose going to America as well, talking about the production management. Again, union houses have all different rules to what we might be used to here in Ireland, so it's all that stuff. You need to have somebody on the technical team to make sure it all goes very smoothly. And again, that was where we had our kind of sharp awakening and learning. And again, I suppose it was, the support of Culture Ireland from our point of view. We couldn't go anywhere without that support. And I'm not, this isn't just being all, thank you, but I really And I think anyone in this room, Mark from Brenner up there is nodding, it is that kind of investment, because touring is expensive. It's expensive here, and once we leave these shores, it is very expensive. And again, it's that contingency, all of that. So I suppose it was on the financial side of things that we had the steep learning curve. But I suppose the positives are like totally outweigh. But Neal, you're not that interested in
I
the
am.
positives. Okay. Well,
Some glass half full. Come on.
Okay.
Look
Yeah,
at positives.
yeah.
I mean, what is it that, as a company when you were starting out, for example, how quickly in the company's career did international touring happen? And was it something you always had your eye on?
Very quickly, and we were very fortunate. We did our first co-production with the ARC Cultural Centre, and it was The Girl Who Forgot to Sing Badly. And we had a really good, strong partnership, and that literally hit the ground running. And it was one of those things where Boomer had it over at IPAY, and that was it was a really kind of cracking the egg open for us, and from there it kind of snowballed. Right. So that kind of thing, it was, I suppose it was very quickly in terms of the company, our own setup, but certainly, and once it kind of started, and again, it's presenters talking to presenters, and as Boomer says, the network is very kind of, I suppose, familial. And once a company starts on the roll, then there is an understanding and an interest in the work, I suppose. So so it was, we were lucky. It was fast. We were older in our careers, but the company was young, so that was great.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, where to start? I think we represent the very small companies. We are only two people, Pernille and I. And where to start? We have this company for 20 years, and right from the start, we went to New York and found a director and made our first show over there, a monologue with me. And we were very young, so it was, I only write masterpieces, so why not? And after that, we went back to New York 2 years after, and then we went to Bali to produce, and Siberia. So from the start, I think it has been.
Why, when you say you went to New York,
we had a director there. We knew him, and I needed to get out of him.
Before you made work anywhere?
What?
New York was the first place you made work?
Yeah.
So you were an international company from birth?
Actually, yes. And from there, but that was for young people. And then for the last 10 years, we have been working for the little ones. And for the last 6 years, we went to the World Expo in Shanghai. And from there on, it has been China very much. 120 shows in China and 3 tours in Japan.
You just talk briefly in terms of China about how you focused in on China and how you make that work successfully for you.
Many people ask me how I get in. I don't know. We only Pernille and I have many caps on, so I'm also the production manager, and it's by coincidence all the time. Of course, we have festivals. Of course, we meet presenters at festivals. But sometimes I really just take a chance. Mm-hmm. For example, they called me from an exclusive shopping center in Xiamen in south of China. And it sounds not that good, but they had a lot of money and they were very, okay, I said, let's go for it. And it turned out to be beautiful, so interesting, so hungry for this kind of work we're doing. It's often like that, take a chance and see how it goes. And I only have good experience. China for me right now they are so curious for this kind of work. They are really, so next year also fully booked, different.
Yeah, and starting to kind of create their own infrastructure and make some of their own work there as well. And people, Farina Chan, I know, and I'm sure everybody else knows.
And in the
Farina,
beginning, of course, can you play for 1,000 people? And if you play for children, it's not allowed to be under 1 hour, and all this. And then suddenly you find the right partners. And
okay, I can come back to you with another question about China, but we're going to go and move around. Paul, off you go.
Okay, I think international touring has been in Cahoots NI's DNA really from birth. We're 16 years this year, and really the company was founded. You know, there was no grand plan to create a company. I was commissioned to write a script, and it ended up being for young people, and it got invited to an international festival. And the only way back then was to actually form a company and get some money, some funding that way. So I think international touring up until 2012 was always part of what we did. We'd tour Ireland, and then someone would have picked it up, and it would be in South Korea, it might be in Japan, it could be anywhere, any one piece of our work that we were working on at that time. And in 2012, everything sort of changed. We realised that we couldn't sustain that. It wasn't sustainable to just go off to South Korea and do 4 days of a show and then come back and pick up where we left off. And also, you know, funding was becoming harder. So strategically, we sat down as an organisation and designed a process that we're now living. So this year alone, we've had 3 different productions. Novelli's War played The Jewel in the Crown in New York. Earlier this year, we've had a 4.5-month tour of Danny Carmo's Mathematical Mysteries. Shush, We Have a Plan was at IPAY this year, and is doing an 8-month tour of the States next year. But that was strategic. It was strategic to look towards IPAY as being the marketplace for us getting our work to a wider audience. Plus, maintaining the fact that our work that we create here is for our audiences here first and foremost, but that fundamentally there was a market that was much bigger than Ireland that we could sell into. And by selling into that market, I mean, Cahoots NI as an organisation now, if I say in 2012, 62% of our income was through grants, trusts and foundations. And today, in our last account, 64% of our income was fee-based. So that's a massive turnaround. And in a world where, you know, trusts and foundations and that financial, world has dried up, or you end up, which was our situation in 2012, where we were having to do 10 weeks of workshops to put on a production, where actually all we wanted to do was put on the production. This seemed like a much better model for us. We've had amazing experiences. I mean, last year, it all started with a little show called Egg, and we got invited to perform that at IPAY. Literally, as soon as the curtain went down, we had several meetings with different agents, and we realised that one of those agents, really connected with the market that we were talking about. And from that show toured for 4.5 months in the States. We created a relationship with that agency that I'm glad to say, we're already booked up to 2020 in some situations, some scenarios, with different pieces of work from our back catalogue. We don't create work that with a plan to say, oh yeah, it's going to tour in America, because I think that's the wrong way to come about it. It just so happens that what we create seems to appeal to American audiences, and you're right, China. I mean, we're doing 8 weeks in China next year, so there's a whole new market there for us as well that seems, to connect with what it is we do. We've had amazing experiences, and we've had a few, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened. Like on the tour last year, we had to fly the entire company to Canada, so they could, get their visa stamped and fly back in again because, there was a hiccup, there was a change in the law. The worst that has ever happened to us was we performed a show called The Magic Hat in South Korea. This is many years ago, and it was the start of the war where there was a lot of beheading happening. And, the show The Magic Hat was about a hat that a performer walked on stage and lifted it and put it on, and he couldn't get it off. And the first thing we do is we behead him to try and get the hat off. So we literally get off the plane in South Korea to be told that a South Korean had lost his head, the first person to actually be executed in the war. And we're sitting with this massive show that has taken months and months of planning, and we know that the first thing that happens is just totally inappropriate for the world that we're in. So there were a lot of government cars came to see. We had to put on a tryout performance for them, and yeah.
Did you adjust it?
We had to. We had no option, but that's something that you're going, I couldn't see that coming.
You're smart, but you're not that smart.
There's no way.
Wow.
So, yeah, interesting.
We'll maybe come back to that into those kind of cultural issues, particularly, and certainly my experience in parts of Southeast Asia, where that's often the case. In America, sometimes there's often things with translation, which I'd like to come to you about, but we want Kieran to chip in as well, in a sense, from a slightly different perspective, I suppose, and in terms of for Culture Island's
yeah, I suppose what I'd say, like picking up on the stories, what we found is the most successful outcomes in terms of companies taking on tours is when the company itself has a strategy, has a touring strategy. So they know what market they're going to, they know who their audience is, they have all the materials ready. I mean, the worst outcomes are kind of a company would be so delighted to get an international invitation. They say, this is it, this is going to be, but actually when you unpick it and you see where is the festival and is it a good match and could it lead to other opportunities, it's a much trickier prospect. So I would think in terms of younger companies who are thinking of, and I know with Cahoots and with Theatre Love It and indeed with Branner, they've clear strategies about where they're going. I mean, some of it may have happened initially by happenstance, but now there's a clear international touring strategy, which should also be integrated into the national activity for your company. It's not two separate things, because so much of the companies that we fund now, they rely on the international income to generate income for their national activity, indeed to amortize some of the costs for the creation of new work. So they'd kind of be the two kind of critical observations that I'd make. And just in terms of a quick word just about how we measure success. There's obviously metrics in terms of audience numbers but I suppose the more critical one is the narrative around the company. So say with Theatre Love It, that was a situation where we would have funded Boomer to see the work here, then there would be the showcase opportunity, and then on to the kind of regular round of a long tour. We don't usually fund one-off presentations now of work just because we don't have the resources to do it and the investment isn't worth it. So we'd be looking for showcase and industry opportunities to create long tours for companies that are viable from our point of view.
Okay. Can I ask the group, something you said in your presentation, Boomer, where you talk about IPAY, and here we are in Baboró, and it's a showcase and a festival which is dedicated to work for young people. And is there a sense, and I'm going to be really careful how I say this in this room before people throw things at me, do you ever feel a danger of kind of ghettoization of children's work and saying it lives in its own world and it doesn't get outside into those, it's just like, so for example, into those bigger festivals, is the place really that, we create specific festivals for this work and that's where it's seen? Or do you sometimes have a frustration or indeed a desire to go, well, actually, I want to be in the Edinburgh International Festival, or I want to be in Sydney Festival, alongside the grown-ups, so to speak? Because I think, the work is often stronger and better, but there's a temptation that it kind of gets pushed to a different place. I can feel the iciness in the room as I'm saying this. So, because it's not what, I kind of feel as though so much of the work I see for children and young people is so brilliant. I want it to be seen almost in a wider context. And yeah. I just wondered, and I mean, even Aisling here, in terms of the relationship between Galway International Arts Festival and Baboró? Are there connections? Oh God, I've really asked the wrong question, haven't I now? Are there connections, and do you sometimes feel there's a disconnect between those worlds? Do you want to start because you had a rest?
We're absolutely ghettoized. We are absolutely, and I think there's positives to the way it is, and there's negatives, or there's opportunities, I suppose. It's great to be in a festival environment where we're all part of the choir, and we're all supporting the work, and we understand the importance of it, and we don't have to have that conversation because we know it. There's comfort in that. There's comfort in having that community at IPAY, and we don't have to talk about how important the work is anymore because we believe it. And so that's great. Yeah. But I find the work that is most interesting and most important for us now as an organization is the work that we're doing outside of the choir, outside of the church. And so just recently in September, we had a big partnership with the Philadelphia Fringe, and the curator there for years has said, yeah, I'm not really interested in work for young people. But you could sit down with him and talk about work by Tim Crouch and by Seven Fingers and by great Belgian artists, and he would look at them from the perspective of great art for adults, and I would be thinking of it as great work for young people. And we were just looking at it from a different perspective. Yeah. And finally this year he had a shift where he needed more bums and seats, and so he opened the door for us to come in and talk about work for young people, and that I think is where we as an organization need to support.
Okay. Paul, do you chip in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think events like these are critical, for us to come together. I mean, and essential, to get the message out there that there is a sector and that work is being created for young audiences. I think the IPAY should be doing a lot more work for young audiences. I think they should be producing work for young audiences a lot more than they are. I think the Lyric Theatre in Belfast ought to do the same. So, I'd throw that question back to you in some respects.
I agree.
I also feel that I'm looking at Belfast and I'm seeing the International Festival there starting to programme more work for young audiences. But we all, we're all touring to regional venues and we're all putting our work out there in any case. We probably need the venues, the bigger venues, to bite a little harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Christian, has there ever been an issue for you, or are you entirely comfortable where your work sits?
So comfortable. No comment. But,
no, that's a perfectly valid response.
Thank you.
Mary?
I think as
you're
Paul
slightly straddling as a company in a way, aren't you, as well?
Well, we are straddled as a company, I suppose, in terms of the work we make. But in terms of like some of the international venues that we would tour to, and again, this is something that is coming up again and again, is some you go in the context of a festival for children. Others, it's you're invited to the venue alongside some other work for adults, and it's not under the banner at Children's Theatre Festival. So I suppose we've had both experiences, but I suppose we've also had the experience of there are some things maybe when you do make work for children, which might be expected, which might be something like, and I'm just using this as an example, a particular an educational resource pack to connect the school in, and so there's those little additional extras which immediately you've got to look at the piece, frame it in that context, provide that where you might say actually this needs to stand as a piece of theatre for the audience without the mediator. So there's those kind of questions as well, and again that's all about are you making work for children only? Do you believe in making work for the child and the adult? And what we always talk about, this win-win-win situation. We love nothing more than the actor, the child and the adult, and it's this three-way thing where the the child is looking at the parent or the older whoever brought them, really enjoying this. They're getting this kick. The father, mother, sister, sibling, whoever it is looking at the child enjoying this, and the performer is having this interaction as well. So it's that kind of theatre for all, you know. But again, there are funding structures as well that, you know, I suppose, you know, we're accountable to, and so that's a whole, you know, it's a whole. But I agree. I do think it is ghettoised.
Yeah. The only thing I would add, I guess, is that my answer really is from a sector perspective, and as an organization, we serve a professional community. But as an artistic director of a series or a festival, my responsibility would be to the young people, and then really I don't give a shit about the adults. And it's about the work, and they don't care if it's world premiere or theater or physical theater, or because they don't have those boxes. And so,
I think I'm not going to put you on the spot. I think Aideen's sat up there. Is that you? Because I think, you know, the ARC is interested that you work with Dublin Theatre Festival, and there's a children's component in that festival. Would you mind? Sorry, I am putting you on the spot. Actually, that's terrible. Would you mind just speaking? Would you mind just speaking briefly just about how that relationship works between the theatre festival and the ARC?
Yeah, well, I think I just want to get a bit more, which is probably as complex as one might imagine. Is the first thing to say. In that, first of all, it's a curated festival. The work is not usually new. So in the first instance, when you're talking about adults or children, you're immediately talking about a festival that has a whole range of work in it. Right? It could be a new commission, it could be a new piece that just opened in the Peacock, it could be a piece that has come into the alley from somewhere else, and the work that generally has been curated at the ARC over the years by a whole range of people, including Marin and Maria, has often had a long life elsewhere. So I immediately see that as a kind of an interesting dynamic where the work that is coming in to be shown to children and their parents or their grannies or grannies or their big sisters has actually had perhaps a year on the circuit in terms of refinement. So on one hand, that means that work is actually really, really, really well cooked. It's been around, it's tried and tested. And so it's the first thing. The second thing is then that within, I suppose, within the program, we're talking about a whole range of age ranges. So immediately you've got more divisions. So, Miriam, when you say it's ghettoised, I often think it is ghettoised within a niche, within a niche, within a niche. We're talking about, is it early years work? Is it the difficult 10 to 12? Is it for that middle range? So I'd say that there are a whole load of lenses through which we see all these things which provide complexity if you want it. But on the other hand, it opens up a whole range of accessibility, which is, again, to speak to what Boomer has just said, children, parents, teachers do not care if this show premiered on the West Coast and is now coming into Dublin. They want to know is a really great show and can we see it. So I think there are a whole range of things going on there. One of the challenges that provides for us is the difficulty actually about new Irish work premiering within that context of a highly curated season where received work is coming in elsewhere. I would identify that as a greater difficulty. What we do have a difficulty with, I don't mind sharing that with everybody, is actually getting attention for it. So, you know, we need to do the likes of getting Nicola Sturgeon to come and see a thing for the great and the good to actually give us a little bit of attention and children's work. So I'd argue for the status of it and children's work we're doing. About attention, but I suppose we're more worse off than our friends in children's books, whose books don't make the bestseller lists either in paper and record because they would skew the lists so drastically in favour of children with Neil John Adams. That's another day.
Thank you. Thank you. Kieran, from your perspective, is there, in terms of a showcase and in terms of how you attract people, is there any kind of dichotomy between that?
We're demand led, so in terms of the regular round, so we're relying on companies to come forward having kind of secured the opportunity. But I suppose, again, an observation would be that I actually think the Irish companies within this genre are doing particularly well at the moment. Like, they are getting international work that far supersedes with other theatre companies for older audiences in terms of the audiences they're reaching, and in terms of the territories, and in terms of the durations of tours. So it's a vibrant sector to be in, whether you feel I have no opinion about whether it's a ghettoized genre, but it's certainly the coming sector, I would feel.
Okay. I'm going to ask a practical question, and then we're going to open it out. So this is your chance to think of what you want to ask. A couple of people have talked about agents and working with agents. I know from my experience of working with an agent in across a wide range of theatre, sometimes it feels like a great thing, sometimes it feels like it hinders. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a bit of your experience in terms of people who might be looking to head out, and whether you've worked with an agent or whether you don't, or whether you've built those relationships yourselves?
Sure. We're in the process of, we have for the first time I suppose we've agent representation. Before we felt we were able to manage it ourselves, and I suppose what Boomer said earlier on was it's the smaller stopgaps in between to make the tour, kind of more, I suppose, just hit, on a longer run. But I suppose as well, those tours where you are, like our initial touring would have been to, I suppose, bigger houses sitting in there for 2 weeks, onto another one for a week, maybe 2 weeks. So we weren't doing the stopgaps. But now we're looking at making a longer tour, and for that we need agents, a representation in America who knows all of those other venues, and can make the tour feasible to go from A to Z, And again, I suppose that's something, and just in terms of the resources of our company now, and because the work is gathering momentum, we can't do that ourselves anymore. So we, decided, let's take on with an agent and allow them to look after our international touring. We are still, we've our 2019 tour at the minute, which is almost there. And I suppose, for example, with that'll be our first time having the on the ground as a result of the engagement with an agent. So, but so far so good. It's like.
Can I just ask, are those schedules sometimes more demanding, the agent's schedule more demanding than
yes,
you might want?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I thought you might all say that.
Absolutely, and that is where...
That's the tough part of when you start out, isn't it?
It is, and that's where, you look at the capacity of your company as well, and you're not going to put necessarily, an much older actor who just doesn't have that muscle anymore, They can't possibly keep going, or maybe they can, But again, it's those kind of decisions, you've got to make. But some of them, and that is the negotiation with the agent, this cannot be grueling, because that's not the kind of tour we're interested in. Do you know? It's just, so that is absolutely, it's, horses for courses.
For me, I've done all my work myself for the last 20 years, and we tour in 42 countries, so that's fine. But for me, United States, always, if I go to the States, I need an agent. So I still have that. I really believe that, because I don't know the market. But the few times I've used an agent, it had made a big distance to my customer, to the theater, to my partners, because they demand something in general. And for me, it's always the personal contact.
How do you balance that? How do you
I just work all the time. So that's, and I really respond really quick and create a good connection with my partners wherever I am. And it has been good so far. But every time I bring in others, you have this.
Yeah, I
think it's interesting.
There's a real culture in the United States, isn't there, of agents, particularly for work for children, young people.
Yeah, actually, there's probably about a dozen agents specifically working with artists that create work only for young people. So it's nice for presenters because they have a relationship with them. Yeah. The challenge is, I think exactly as you're saying, it's if you're a new company forming that relationship with the agent, it's knowing enough or having the confidence enough to know what you want, because an 8-month tour sounds brilliant until you're in the 3rd month of it. And, you've got your souvenir cowboy boots and exactly. So, I remember poor Shona Rep when she first toured North America and she just went home wrecked. from playing every small town and bumping into venues herself, and you know, crappy little hotel rooms, and so it's knowing what to ask for, I think, within that.
What's your experience?
We've never toured without an agent. Thankfully, we got what I consider to be a brilliant agent, you know, and we've used them every time. But yeah, they'll sometimes present a schedule that you'll have to really sit down with them and go, you know, we would prefer to lose that date and have 3 days off, because actually everybody's going to be exhausted by that point. But, and you know, what's really good now is we now know the tour. So all of our tours start in Miami or West Palm Beach, and they go right across to California.
You made that sound really good. You say that again. That was at Miami, West Palm Beach.
And
I thought you said
but
that.
they then come the whole way back. You know, so that's, or sometimes just halfway back, but that's a 4.5 month tour. So we've done that a few times now, and we know what that circuit is like. We know what, you know, where are the extremely long drives. But these agents that we're working with have real thought for the artists. That's what I would say, is that they're, you know, they're not just about their percentages and getting as many dates in the diary as possible. They're very, very focused on maintaining the level and the standard of the work, because their reputation is on the line if we go into a venue and the show's appalling. So there are times you've got to sit down and go, actually, we prefer to have, you know, less of an income that week, because we just need to have a bit of a breather. And we always put a break in the middle so that it's not just constant.
From a friend inside, Keane, do you get engaged with that side of it, or do you trust the company that they're gonna
relying on the company to tell us,
and they're gonna be well advised?
Yeah, it just would depend whether the artist could be the applicant, or indeed the booking agent could be the applicant.
There is a great disparity between what the UK, what the euro is worth, and what the Canadian American dollar is worth. And that's really important. You know, if you stand by having to have a certain amount of venue per show, a certain amount of revenue per show, rather, and don't have built in any of that flexibility to maybe go to producers and presenters who don't have the luxury of that kind of budget, then you're denying opportunities to your artists, but also to those wonderful audiences, because you're just insisting on a certain level that may not be possible for your presenter to the producing organization or the festival to meet that expectation. And the third thing was just to reiterate what Moran said about the production end of it. You know, you've got to consider something as simple as, you know, electrical in UK versus electrical in North America. When you come in with your lovely little boutique lamps that only run on a certain kind of European electrical currency, and they can't be converted without blowing something up in the venue you're presenting, I mean, this poses a real problem. So just to, you know, throw Canada into the mix, our venues aren't 7, 8, 900, they're 200 and 100 and 300, and I value and treasure that, because I think that's a real chance for an intimate experience that's long and real, and provides seeds for all kinds of further relationships, both for you and for the presenter, and of course for the children. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Also, the thing you have to consider when you're considering international touring is having a really good conversation with the artists that are involved in the show, performers. That it's okay for us to have a conversation with agents or with festivals for a show that could be happening in 2019 or 2020, but you have to already have had that conversation with the people who are making the show, which is that. I want to say, can we have you for 5 years? So we have 2 years to make it and 3 years to tour. And if we have first dibs on you, then that'd be great. Or if something else comes up for you, can you let? So we do kind of like a traffic light thing where we know there's a green, which is the definite period. We keep an orange just in case. If they get something, they can tell us that it's in that orange period, so we know not to promise it to somebody else. But we've been lucky so far that the guys that we've worked with have been happy to tour. Not that many people that want to do meetings and states.
Yeah.
You know, but you have to really make sure they know exactly what they're getting.
But since it's also what I've seen in Ireland, which is I think is really fantastic, and it certainly was much tougher in Scotland, is that companies were touring, and I think you've had some of this. They tend to build a repertoire of people who can come in and out, and the swapping in and out is something is.
I think my worst enemy sometimes, like having somebody in a show and then selling that show.
Cannibalizing them.
That's a big problem.
And on that point, is your work is always contained, so there's no danger of if you're not doing it, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. So we are, Pernille and I, and we are doing everything.
Totally self-sufficient. And that's
and I don't know if I understood you right, but many ask, you can make it double, you can sell more.
Versions of it.
And I've seen so many Danish theaters doing it, and I think it's good. Trust me, I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's they cannot make. Of course, a show can be very good, but if you place them with, I don't like it.
I don't either. I'm with you. You make one version.
So,
and you stick to it.
Yeah.
Marin, is that something that you come? I mean, I know you've had actors sometimes doing this show and then having to move them around. And
yeah, which is it's really tricky. And again, I suppose it comes back to like something was mentioned earlier. I love the joy of working with actors who will make work for young audiences and who make work for adult audiences, and this kind of crossover to keep that open. But again, I suppose then we're already we've something next year that's touring. And one of our actors, I'm thinking, oh God, I think the Abbey might have them on an international tour, which is a whole other question.
Can possibly comment.
No, but
how much are you paying them?
But I suppose like any company making work for anybody, same thing. Some actors are available, some are not. So be it, and we have to deal with it when they're not, and recast. Off we go.
But it's a very valid thing that Mark said. I mean, when I'm casting now, I'm looking as much towards good company members as I am towards bloody good actors. You need to have that absolute balance.
On the length of touring you're doing and where you are. And
you just need.
It's tough. It'd be tough in small towns wherever you are in the world, but in China or America, you need a company who can actually still have dinner together occasionally.
Absolutely, yeah. And just the touring logistics. I mean, obviously, it's a lot more expensive because you've got to make sure everybody has their own space. So. Yeah. If you're 2 weeks in somewhere, don't put your artists into a crap hotel for 2 weeks. Get really good self-catering accommodation and make sure everybody's happy. It's things like that are simple to say, but you do them and they have a big impact.
Because there is a pull, obviously, and this is Irish touring as well, there is the pull to look at, okay, where can we pull in the reins here? Where can we, and often that is in the, maybe we'll go for this accommodation instead of that. And as you say, it leads to unhappy people. Yeah. And also in terms of images, and especially with IPAY or investing in good videos, investing in all of that. We're always saying this to younger artists. Put the money into it. It will pay off because it's the first thing that won't be done. I'm going to save that 700 quid that, is going to cost me to get a really smart edited video. I'm going to save that. And then you're like, God, no. And we absolutely in our earlier years made that mistake. And that's something, to really invest in those materials because that is going to pay dividends,
And it's why it's so terrific that Culture Island pay for 5-star accommodation around the world. Isn't that?
I just remember from my producing days, my lesson was crappy accommodation equals a delayed technical rehearsal. That was a pretty good
brilliant. Words of wisdom. Yeah, I think. Any further questions? Oh, sorry.
I know you mentioned earlier in terms of work and working kind of siloed maybe, and
Yeah.
I think sometimes we are in this lovely, very lovely bubble. But just from my point of view, I suppose, and I think from Barbara's point of view, we have this chock-a-block 7 days in the year, and we bring in all these wonderful Irish and international artists, and I suppose we'd love to be able to do more of it, and I think in Ireland in general, although things are slowly changing, but I would love to see more children's work touring. I'd love to see more children's work in Galway, and I think as things are beginning slowly to change, and Irish people making more work again, getting a little bit more support, and as are things like the regional venues where I've worked in regional venues where we've had amazing productions with people like Theatre Lovett, and we just couldn't bring people in. So I think there's a long kind of we have to take a long view in terms of developing those audiences outside of places like Baboró, where we're very fortunate to have huge audiences, and I think that's something that all of the sector have to kind of take on to support artists to make that work. And also with places like Galway International Arts Festival, I know that Branner's show had its world premiere here actually during the Arts Festival, which was fantastic to see. And I think it's these conversations, within our sector, but also pushing it out is really important in terms of the work being taken seriously. And to my mind, a lot of children's work is as good, if not better, and more inventive and more considered than a lot of adult work, in fact. And I think it's really, again, part of this conversation that we need to be having, to stand up and say, actually, we're not the work we're making, or the fact that we're working in this sector, we're not at a different level to anyone else. And I hope that work will begin to be taken a bit more seriously. And finally, I just wanted to refer to Christian and Pernilla, because I think it's really interesting that we have a lot of really successful companies here, but I think it's really
and then us.
and you, absolutely. But that there are two of you, and I think it's great for some of the more emerging artists maybe in this sector who are in the room, to know that actually you can go it alone, and you in terms of without an agent and without maybe a big company structure, so I think that's kind of encouraging, and it might be interesting because I don't think so many Irish companies have much experience of touring to China and Japan, so it might be interesting to kind of just give a sense of where one would start with that.
I also drink beer. You can talk to me later. I will leave tomorrow, so it has to be tonight. I will definitely.
And there is an artist delegate night tonight, so come and find these people and quiz them.
Yeah. Okay. Do we any final bit? Oh, we do there and then this.
And this is just, I suppose, for the where and the people who make work and tour over to the States. Is there an audience difference in terms of the sensibility? I know you for the American market, but
yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I actually scrolled down lost in translation. Is there a sense sometimes the work gets lost in translation, not literally in terms of if it's text-based, but also in terms of the content as well. So, I mean, Boomer, do you want to give us your perspective? You talked earlier about sometimes in the US, for example, there's a sense it's slightly more conservative than you've worked in Europe. Or?
It depends. There's absolutely a cultural context for anywhere in North America, and again, like Toronto is different from Nashville, is different from New York, is different from the middle of Idaho, there's the Bible Belt in the U.S., which is extremely conservative, and so there's so many stories I could tell about sensibilities to the work. From a group of schools in Texas that absolutely would not present Moby Dick because there's Dick in the title, honestly. Sorry, but yes.
No,
we used to hear often from presenters, I can't book that. And because of whatever sensibility, because of nudity or almost nudity, working in your underwear or whatever, to language, to perceived violence. And we started to tell the presenters that they need to talk to the artists about what they're perceiving that they couldn't present to their audience. Because very often the artists are not aware of the context in which the presenter is coming from. And so my big example I use all the time is from a Danish company, Mullin, who has a beautiful show, Lenny and George, which is of mice and men. And in the original production, they say fuck about 53 times. And I know that because I sat beside presenters who counted every single time they said, fuck George, fuck Lenny. And it is a beautiful, beautiful, powerful show. But because they said the F-bomb 53 times, those presenters got up, walked out, and never had a conversation. But a couple of us did, and we asked, why do you say fuck so often? It's not in the book. It's nowhere in the book. And so why was it important for you to use that word? And they looked at us like, oh, is that an issue? We put it in because Danish teenagers use that word all the time when they're talking to each other, and it's just part of the context for us trying to connect to the audience. If that word's an issue, we can take it out. And they did, and we presented it. And so if that conversation didn't happen, that work never would have come over. And so there's a responsibility. Again, it's all about that relationship. You have to have that conversation and say, why did you make that choice? And for us, I can't present that to my audience. Is there something we can do here?
I mean, just a slight flip to that was at National Theatre of Scotland, we took David Gregg's play The Monster in the Hall to China, which is a show for teenagers and older children. And there's a character in the book who's clearly gay, the boy is gay. And we were adamant, we had to send the script over first, and they wanted to read it and all of this. And we said, we're not going to change the script. This is the play we're going to do. I don't know whether your experience, my advice, unless you speak very fluent, either Mandarin or some Chinese, is to take a really brilliant Chinese translator with you. We had somebody who worked with us in the UK, Shi Hui Wang, who was a brilliant woman who worked for National Theatre of Scotland, who was obviously spoke perfect English and Chinese. And we sat with her and said, will you watch the subtitles? And when you tell us, because they promised us they weren't going to change a single word, and they changed it. They kept, and I sat with her and I said, like, nudge me if they change it. And literally, I was sore by the end. They kind of 53 fucks were nowhere to be. I mean, but they weren't. But the fact that he was gay, they kept changing it to strange or weird, and it was actually not just changed, but offensively changed. And we really dug in on it and made them change it. And it was just that thing about, that was crucial to the show. It would kill the show if it wasn't. And just having that person who said, they're changing it. And what was also brilliant was that on the Chinese kind of version of WhatsApp, all the young people were laughing at the translation, saying, that's not what's happening, So it kind of, even, it was counterproductive in its own way. But it was just a real lesson for us was, have somebody with you who really understands the language, really, when you're using text. And your subtitle, and that was a text-heavy show in some ways. Sorry, I didn't mean to butt.
No, that's good.
Any lost in translation stories? Apart from you've done your beheaded. I mean, you've set the bar pretty high, to be honest. So,
in terms of content, not actually with work that we've brought out. I mean, I think there's always here, everywhere, there's always that ongoing conversation about age suitability. And I mean, I genuinely struggle sometimes. We have a piece of work touring at the minute that I was convinced in the rehearsal room was 7+. And I'm now looking at it and I'm going, I think that might be 8+. And in the States, I found that, with certain pieces of work, Danny Carmo particularly, we would have that for Key Stage 2. Here and in America, it's for a slightly older age range. I directed a show once in Bethesda, which is a really affluent area in Washington, D.C. And it was I went over to cast it, came back, and then went over to rehearsals, and it was about pirates. And when I got to day one of rehearsals, I was told there will be no hitting. There will be no, play acting, fighting. They will not have swords. They will not have guns. And I was, what? How do we do a play about pirates without those, So, there's an example of, And what was really interesting there is that show, the donor or the particular gentleman that was funding that production, obviously, made it very clear that he didn't want anything relating to,
Pirates.
He should have done a different play.
I think so.
But there, and that's an amazing venue,
Yeah.
But that goes to show you.
Mary, did you? Because I'm going to look at you.
I have so many things now, I've lost track of all of them.
Okay, don't worry. Because I remember when we brought Wolves in the Walls, there was a huge. I mean, that whole show was about what is the age range for that show, and we had there was a massive debate in the company, even with the co-producers with Improbable, who wanted. Well, they wanted it to be an adult. They wanted to do Shock-Headed Peter, really, and we kept saying, but it's Neil Gaiman. It's a picture book. So I think what we used, was we used to use the expression, children of 8 and over who aren't, or anybody who's not a scaredy cat, and that was the expression we used, and it really worked. It kind of gave people a hint of, not a scaredy cat, just a hint of sensitivity.
But it was something like that. It was because the masks were so good. I mean, they were Julian Crouch.
Crouch, yeah.
Was it still Improbable then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were still talking then, yeah.
But yeah, the mask work was extraordinary, and talk about making good photographs. It's a big part of my. I might curate a season and I bring it to our marketing team, and if they look at photographs and they're like, this isn't a good, this doesn't work in the New York market, and I can't sell it. But with the photographs with that one, they were so
The wolves' heads were so amazing.
And they're masks, right? So they're not in context,
Yeah.
they're not in action, and so it was really tough for us. So we had to come up with a tagline.
Yeah.
I call it cultural translation, what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
What you were talking about.
Yeah.
Just being able to talk to a Danish company who has nudity in their show and saying, we bring third graders to this show, I'm fired, they're fired, they're fired, there's a penis. And so they laughed, and then
Moby.
they didn't mind kind of, I think they did one of those pixelated things. It was like first new clothes.
Yeah.
This is what they did.
Yeah.
Not America, no.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to say one other thing about, because I'm really into the advocacy part of the silos that we have. But Focus did program a work for young audiences in the International Festival this year in Edinburgh. Baracala Danza came. And so I think people like you, Neil, and the rest of us getting into Fergus's ear and all of those big players, the Mark Russells and all that, to really understand that these and know these artists, and that the work is that good, so that it can just become mainstream as much as anything else. It's art. We got to do the advocacy work, but. I know Mark wants to do something again under the radar in New York with Ann Carlson dancing with goats, but that's fine. She's not naked, she's just dancing with goats. And so he wants to do that.
Is the goat naked?
It's pixelated.
Phil Hadley.
No, it's okay, we'll pass it by.
Sure?
Yeah, so I'll speak to you about it personally.
Oh, Christ.
You missed out there, Neil.
Okay. I think we're probably... Can I just thank brilliant panel here, Boomer, Murray, Christian, Paul, Ian. Thank you.